enthusiastic about as the shimmer in his eye. Why? At the beginning you're like, girl, you got the hots for him? Okay, so today we're gonna talk about one of, I think, the more well-known YA trilogies, that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I read it last week. Not one, not through two, but all three of them in a span of like 4 days. Did I sleep during that time? No. It's because I got the copy of the first one. I wanted to read it for a while because I saw all the fan art. I saw people being enthusiastic about it, and I'm just like, kind of want to talk to you guys about it. So for anyone who doesn't know what The Cruel Prince is about, is basically for the main character, her name is Jude, and her and her sisters are taken to the Fey world, basically, when they're kids. So she's around 7 when they're taken. The story picks up when she's 17. She's been studying amongst them, but because she is human, she's very much looked down upon. So because she's lived there, she also sees it partially as a home, and she wants to kind of earn her keep there. And then, you know, you kind of follow her in how she tries to find her place. And then obviously there is a fey prince who's cruel, hence the name. And I kind of follow the trilogy, you kind of see what happens and how their relationship grows, whatever it is. She obviously has a lot of obstacles to overcome, a lot of scheming, a lot of fighting, a lot of backstabbing, a lot of, you know, not easy going for her. Fall back into YA, they were like, right at the beginning, I was initially like, oh, I don't like this series, they make so many stupid decisions, what's going on? And then for a moment I was like, Manon, these are literal teenagers. That's also why the story could happen, because they are teenagers. And I think as soon as I realized that and kind of read it with that idea of like, this is not people my age, these are people who are younger than me, it just became a lot more enjoyable. So that was one of my first realizations of getting back into YA and thinking, I have to read this instead of like me, which is the last time that I was like kind of people my age, to realizing that I am older than them. Doesn't mean that I'm superior to them, it just means for me realizing to fully understand a book, age in characters also matters. Which brings me to one of the things that I love. What Holly Black did was, you know, to create the fey prince Cardan and make him a teenager. Because how many times have we not seen like the ancient prince, fey, king type of person who is hundreds of years old, and then the teenager, like then the very young person, the kid who needs to save everyone, and he falls for her. And I'm just over here like, it's kind of weird. The fact that she has to partially clean up your mess and she makes better decisions than you, it's kind of weird. Especially when it comes to like political things or ruling things. So yeah, she made them the book like similar in age. I think they're 1 year apart or at least. I think Jude starts at 17, Cardan starts at 18. I think they both age a year over the trilogy. At least 1 year passes, that's all I know. So right now, like the second pro that I had was her writing style. I did really enjoy it. She has sometimes, initially I was kind of afraid because I felt like she kind of became poetic. Prose, like a lot of sort of beautiful written prose here and there, like put into it, and I was like, oh, I hope this isn't like one of those one-offs that you come by very once in a while in a book and that's it. And it isn't. Like, Holly Black has a really good way of sprinkling those in throughout her books. Some very beautiful poetic lines, very, like at the beginning I kind of took used to it, but because it comes by and I feel like it's got a very good ratio to the book, it didn't feel very outlandish. It didn't feel like she was abandoning her, like it was very separated from her writing style. Like it seems very much a part of it, in a sense that, yeah, it doesn't feel like it was an out of place thing. Love that, and I feel like that way just made it more interesting for me to read, and it just like the way she described things through those sentences worked. Like it really helped you to create the world in your head a lot better. So yeah, props for that one. The next one. What I also really enjoy is that she does the Fae world, and I think often when we look at the Fae world, they do describe a lot of the fairies who are not necessarily conventionally pretty. And they kind of get, you know, posed as like background characters, and she doesn't do that. Like some of the main characters are ones that aren't considered conventionally attractive, and it works. Like it's just like, and then she just focuses on who they are. They're not like shoved as the background characters. Obviously the two main characters are still very, very beautiful. Jude talks about Cardan at the beginning. You're like, girl, you got the hots for him. You find him very attractive, like more so than when you just don't like the person and he's just randomly attractive, if you know what I mean. She talks about a lot of different fairies, and they all came by, and a lot of them had their own little place in the story and in the books. Then that I really enjoyed the sibling bond that Jude has with her sister. So she's one twin sister, which is Karen, and then they both have an older sister, which is Vivi. Now she is like the Fae child, and their mother, which they share, she's human. So at the beginning of the book, which is something that I also enjoyed, which is kind of weird to say, but like she just makes her statement very clearly about how brutal the fairy world can be. Thanks for setting the tone, for making it very clear from the beginning what kind of world these girls are taken to. The bond that they have with one another is just, I feel like, really well written in a sense that you can realize that they are sisters, they have some similarities, but they're also very much their own thing. And also hard-headed about the very different things, which I also really enjoyed. So I think that was one of my most favorite relationships in the books. The differences between them, and also seeing how they connect with one another, and also how they reshaped their relationships throughout the books. So what I'm realizing with this book specifically, and I think I had kind of a hunch for it for a while, is that I'm really into like also the political scheming aspect of books, like where they have to worry about like, how do I gain power? How do I keep it? Who can I trust? What's going on? There are people raising armies behind my back. Who's trying to stab me in the back? Either literally or figuratively. Figuratively. Yes. And I really enjoy that. I think that doesn't really combine in the first book. I think it's mainly the second one. That's why that one was my favorite, which is uncommon, because generally I either like the third book the most, like with the one big finale, which I didn't really. I kind of get it, but I kind of felt like it was dragged out. And anyways, I'll get to it in a second. What I'm trying to say is like, I find that more realistic. If you want to create a world that shows you how cruel things can be, having things that don't shy away from the gore are really helpful in keeping or building that world for me. Which also brings me back to the cons, which is that I just didn't buy, like I didn't understand how cruel Cardan is supposed to be, because she isn't selling it to me. Especially like, I know it's called The Cruel Prince, but because we only read from Jude's point of view, like she consistently tells you like, oh, he's the worst person ever, he is like super cruel, like you can't trust him. And then, you know, when you're like standing against the other, she's like, oh, is he like helping me now? Like sort of like that, or he's like terrible, but he isn't like that terrible as some of his friends. And I feel like at that point you kind of already know like there's more to it. Like it just isn't sold to me as him being extremely cruel. I mean, you're like, well yeah, but like have you seen his friends? It just doesn't really work for me. Like I just wasn't sold on it. And I think by the third book, when he's like, yeah, people think that I'm the worst and I'm cruel, and then like other people tell them or tell Jude how terrible of a person Cardan is or portrays himself to be, I'm just like, oh right, he's supposed to, like, because you just, I feel like I had to be told consistently how bad he was, and I wasn't really shown it And that just, I don't know, I feel like I missed that part. Like, for someone who's supposed to be like extremely cruel, I just didn't feel like that happened, which also relates to the like enemies to lovers storyline. Like, I think right from the beginning you realize that they don't hate each other. Like, it's slightly there already at the beginning, and I noticed, so I feel like it was just more of a like, we hate each other because we kind of have to, and we have a fierce competition. I feel like maybe if, I don't know, if she sold out like the enemies part a lot stronger at the beginning, it would have worked more for me. Like, if Jude didn't see Cardan's delays or Cardan's doubts or like the shimmer in his eye, which he sometimes talks about, it just kind of seemed like reluctant lovers to lovers. I think only at the end of the second book you kind of feel the most animosity between them, but then Jude is like, oh, I also still like him, so there's like not very much enemies there, as much, like I said, reluctant lovers. So this also brings me onto something else, is that the whole series is written from Jude's point of view, and although it's fine, I feel like I'm missing out on so many other good stories and sides of the story, and you're missing a lot. You're missing so much to the story. Like, I just felt like sometimes it wasn't really fleshed out that well, and I think I would have loved for this series to be multiple POV. Whether that's just her and Cardan at the same time. Like, I know there's like a third book with his point of view, bits and pieces with his point of view. I just feel like, I don't know, it just felt like at some points it just felt kind of flat for me, where I was like, I just wish I could understand this a little bit more or know a little bit more. It's a small thing, but for me I think it really changes the way people view certain actions in the book. I'm so clear trying not to give spoilers, but anyways, that, and I think one of the last things that bothered me kind of the most, especially at the ending, there are multiple times, and this happens a lot, is that Holly Black writes side characters, B characters, and she heavily invests in their storyline because they have something to do with the main character, which is Jude at this point. You fully get invested and you know their background and their storylines and everything, and then as soon as they serve their a little bit of purpose, they just kind of disappear. Sometimes literally, but sometimes they just fizzle out in the storyline, and where they were put up as like, this person we should watch out for because they're pretty dangerous, and then at the end it's kind of like, well, okay, that person is there too, I guess. So they've kind of served their purpose for that one book or those few chapters, and it kind of fizzles out again, and it just annoys me a little bit, because they're like brought to you as like this character that's become a lot bigger, a lot more interesting, and they're just not. And I find it hard to believe that Jude wouldn't have more interactions with them. That's kind of my thing. And this brings me one of them. Here's the thing, something you need to know about me. I am terrible at riddles. Like, I just don't do well with them. I never have. And this book has quite a few of them, so sometimes I've kind of caught them. Mostly they figured it out before I did, except at the end. Like the big one, the main riddle that gets solved, you're like, yeah, this is what you need to do, clearly. And I feel like because I can figure it out as someone who is terrible at riddles, and then you have a main, like one of the characters who has studied this for years and has always been surrounded by riddles, can't figure it out. Why? And it's such a shame, because I'd rather have her worried about the proposition that the riddle gives to Jude and how she deals with that, rather than her worrying about what it actually means. I feel like that ending could have just been a lot more interesting, especially because we only read from her POV, so we could have spent a lot of time with her psychologically, just thinking like, okay, this is what the riddle puts in front of me, what choice do I make? And because I figured it out, immediately. And that's not like a pat on the back, that's me like, that riddle is so clear today with me as someone who is terrible at riddles. I feel like this should be very easy. Like, maybe not for Jude, which is fine, but I think if you have someone next to you, multiple people who have hundreds of years experience with riddles, it should kind of make sense. So I just feel like that finish was kind of like, all right, it's there, I guess, it's fine. I think it's just one of those books that I really wish I would have loved more than I did. And I'm not mad at it, I'm just kind of not sad, like, because it's so neutral. There are definitely things I enjoyed, and there are definitely things, but there are also things I just didn't, and I just wasn't sold as much on it as I did. I'm pretty sure I'll give Holly Black like another, I feel like she also read other books, so I'll definitely read it at some point. I don't know if it's gonna be this year, maybe next year. With the amount of books I still want to read. There are so many of them. Okay, so I'm editing right now and I'm realizing that I totally forgot to film an outro. So this is it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Comment, like, and subscribe. And then I'll see you guys again next time. Until then, have